So one of the things that people in Midland don't know, let alone within the West Texas region and Texas in general, Midland Community Theatre is one of the 5 largest community theaters in the nation by any metric.
What?
Yeah.
So when you say that, what do you mean? Is it population of your theater staff?
If you're talking about the size of the theater staff, the income revenue streams, your expenses, of course. But then when you talk about the quality of shows, the size of shows, those metrics, we're very well renowned.
Hi, I'm Jessica McCoy here at Raising Midland, a podcast for parents in the Permian. Today I am here with my friend who works at the Midland Community Theatre. I'm just so excited for y'all to get into this episode with me because of one thing. Honestly, who was not obsessed with Anastasia and the Romanov family? I mean, as a little kid, that was one of mine, along with Titanic. You know, love it. I feel like that's every little second grader's hyperfixation. Well, anyway, let's get into it with my friend Adam. How's it going, Adam?
It's going well.
Cool. Well, we were just talking. We kind of started our conversation because I am a huge theater nerd. And I don't know, it's just something I grew up with as a little kid. First couple of years of my life were in Houston, and then I moved to Austin, which had limited theater back when I was growing up.
It was the university alone.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes UT didn't really have, age appropriate things for a little fourth grader to go to. But I grew up going to the Houston Community Theater and the Houston Children's Theater. And if you're from Houston, you guys know what an incredible production that is. Yeah. It truly is. Well, anyway, let's back up and let's hear your story. Okay, so Adam, what is your first and last name? And tell me a little bit about yourself.
So my first and last name is Adam Sahli, and I grew up in South Dakota. So I grew up in a town up in the northeast corner called Aberdeen, and it's the 3rd largest city in South Dakota.
Not to be confused with Scotland.
Right. Or Washington.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't know there was one in Washington.
Yes,
That's cool.
Just south of Spokane, I believe.
Okay.
So it's a town of about 25,000.
Wow.
So it's
very small.
Yes. I always find it amusing when people are like, oh, Midland's so small. And I'm like, Midland would be the largest city in most states.
Yeah, you're like, dial
Go
it
to
back.
the Dakotas.
Yeah. It's cute that you think that. Congratulations. That's very cool. Well, cool. So South Dakota, and we were talking a little bit about your family because we kind of both share Eastern European type family. My family's from Lithuania, and your family is from...
My grandparents on my mother's side came to the States from Latvia and due to the war and everything. So it really lent itself to me becoming an artist, the ability to move around the country, all that kind of stuff, because my immediate family was in the Dakotas, but my aunts and uncles were everywhere from San Diego, Milwaukee, Minneapolis, down in Dallas. My great-grandmother had retired to and everything. So.
Hey, that's awesome. Community theater there as well.
Yes.
So you got the Meyerson and DSO. Just the best. Okay, so tell me, your schooling, how did you, I don't know. Okay, so me being a jock, I'm a little bit of a nerd myself, and I love academics. If I could be in school for the rest of my life, I would. My poor husband, I'm trying to push for a PhD now, and he's like, can we not? So what we were talking about initially was your role in studying psychology and how that's affected you and how you view theater. So tell me a little bit about your academic background.
Yeah, so I originally went to NDSU, North Dakota State, up in Fargo, and it was one of those that I grew up in an athletic family. My dad was a football, wrestling, and track coach. So I grew up around that, and that was kind of always a part of the mentality and how I went about things. I came into theater very late, not until I was in high school.
Wow.
And it was just something I had a knack for and fell in love with, and it was unlike anything from the sports world.
No joke.
The best thing I can compare it to arts in the sports world is golf, where it's the one time where you can't just do it harder to be better at it.
Hold on, let's pump that analogy. Okay, my English major, and so we were both talking about you're a psychology major and I was a sociology major. That analogy was perfect. So let's kind of talk about that, then we'll get back to your academics. So you were saying that theater is like golf in the sports world. So is it because it's like literally you can just hit the ball all the time to build that muscle memory, but it takes one variable going off for you to completely
And not only that, there's a finesse, right? For me, my sports were wrestling and football, which are very much do it harder, run faster, go bigger, jump higher, all that kind of stuff. When it came to any time I still play golf, like my drive game, great. The second I have to play mid or putt, I'm like, well, this has gone out the window. 'Cause
Exactly.
finesse is not my thing there.
Yeah.
So art really became a useful tool for me to slow my brain down, my thinking. It actually took a lot of anxiety out of my life.
Yeah. Because you have to focus on one thing.
Yes.
I'm trying to learn golf.
Yeah.
Don't ask me to play. My poor husband's like, what are you doing? I can, similar to what you were explaining with golf, I can really hit the ball really, really hard, but my accuracy is just not there.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to be a land animal.
Yeah.
So you have this athletic background. You get into it, let's just say late in life, probably within the theater world.
Yes.
In high school, and then you go to college. And what really sparked your interest in studying psychology?
So I've just always been interested in just how people think, why they interact the way they do. Some of it came from my own battles with depression and anxiety and wanting to understand how my brain worked and what, right? And really just trying to understand why am I thinking this way? What is the cause and function? And then the more I started doing theater with college, the more interested I became in that. I am very blessed and lucky to have some innate talents as a performer.
Yeah. So tell me about that. So you started noticing in probably college that you had a little bit of these layers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you were saying, okay, well, how can I touch into these to inform my practices? Were you doing theater in college?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so originally it was when I was looking at NDSU, they gave me my scholarships, all of that kind of stuff. I ended up hurting my back, and so after my freshman year, I transferred back to my hometown. There's a university there, and so I was able to rehab at home. Football was not going to be a thing.
So you were a student athlete?
Yep.
What position?
Fullback.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Are your knees okay?
No. Not even a little.
It's usually O linemen and then fullbacks that are like, how did you know I have a, like, I can see the scar, like when they're wearing shorts and they're like, how did you know I played that? I'm like, you're not a kicker, clearly.
You blew out your PCL.
You're also like got some shoulders and like you're usually tall,
Yep.
So wait, you're really amongst student athletes. I feel like you can appreciate this because I swam obviously and like that. People literally do not think that student athletes can be multidimensional.
No, and it's, I do think it's been one of those things since I've moved around the country.
Do you think it's changing?
I do think it's changing, and I think certain regions are better about it than others, seeing people as holistic. I don't know if it has to do with growing up in South Dakota. The region I was at, there was a lot of pushback against necessarily crossing over. You could be a student athlete, you could be an artist athlete.
Yeah.
You couldn't be a
Theater
athlete
kid.
artist.
Yeah.
That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
But I was very lucky. My father was one of my coaches and everything. So
cool.
Yeah, and he was incredibly supportive. He, again, the anxiety, depression side of things,
Yeah.
he was always there to support me and make
Also,
sure that
that's
those
a big thing in student athlete, like that
Yes.
population in general. And, studying psychology, I bet you kind of appreciated that. Like, I bet you, I don't know, maybe I'm assuming, but there may have been some comfort in studying psychology, to kind of like normalize your feelings. I know for me, I didn't really know how to interact with the world. I'm adopted. Like, my family is from Lithuania. Like, my mom is first generation Lithuanian, and being an adopted person, you don't really know how you're tethered in this world oftentimes. So for me, like studying and becoming a student athlete, like you kind of cling on to these identities. But the problem is when you're a student athlete, oftentimes you can be typecasted. I think that's the perfect word.
Yeah,
that literally just came to me. I was like, oh, that was good. Good job. That does not happen often. Do not expect that from me always. Okay? Like, it's first cup of coffee. You got me. But I feel like it's so difficult when you're a student athlete because there's so much pressure. A lot of people don't realize how much like effort. It's not just if you're a fall sport like football. You're actually training in the summer.
Yes.
So then, you're having to also balance your college education as well.
Yeah.
It's difficult.
And for me, there was almost a struggle I came across between my two sports, with it being football and wrestling.
You were allowed to do two?
Yeah. Well,
So you're like the baseball.
Again,
What's that guy-
25,000 total people.
I know.
In
Oh,
my
yeah, that's true.
hometown,
They
right?
needed somebody to do both.
Yeah, you better figure it out.
That's so cool. Because my husband's a huge Aggie, and there was an Aggie quarterback. I cannot remember his name, but he played baseball and then randomly switched to play football.
Yeah.
And he had a scholarship for baseball, and then he switched.
Yeah.
Cortland Sutton.
Yes.
That's it.
Okay.
I think that's right.
Well, and Cortland Sutton, maybe. So he ended up graduating as a wide receiver at SMU.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I think he went back for his master's. So we were talking about that. I don't know. I feel like I should know that, but maybe that's not the right football player. But there was one football player at A&M.
Well, and there's been a lot through history. When
I
you
didn't
look
realize
at,
that.
So Kyler Murray.
Kyler Murray.
Yeah.
That's it. Because his dad played baseball.
Yes, and
Right?
same with Patrick Mahomes.
Oh, I didn't realize.
Russell Wilson was drafted in both so Kyler Murray is one who I think he was the #1 pick in both the
Yeah.
MLB draft as well as the NFL draft. And
That's insane.
chose football. So
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Thank you for correcting me
Yeah.
because I was like, who is that? I
Yeah.
feel like every Aggie is going to be like, it's Kyler Murray. And then all like on Reddit, they're going to just be trolling me. Okay, cool. So you were studying psychology. You're such a multidimensional person. What was that moment for you that was like, I need to get my master's degree? And what is your master's degree in? We kind of chatted on that. And then I was like, no. Hold on, we actually have to get this on camera, so tell me about that.
So my MFA is in Masters of the Fine Arts is in theater direction specifically. And that was, I got in, theater directors tend to be older. When they're accepted, I was 22, a year out of undergrad, and I knew that they wanted to bring me in for musical theater performance. And I was like, I'm not going to be an actor. I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
So I leveraged, what they wanted and used that for my assistantship. I'm like, so you're going to let me in. I will act for all of, my room and board money.
Yeah.
And then
That's honestly no different than being a student athlete.
Yes.
I will do my job in order to get my education.
And that was another one of those advantages. There's been so much that being an athlete has given me within the theater world.
So tell me about that, like just the physicality too. I know that, like, I mean, I don't know, but like I can appreciate at least that your work ethic to have to go through rehearsals and like, I mean, I have dyslexia, so like I could never like actually remember lines probably, but I really admire people who are able to do rehearsals and are able to really stick it out day in and day out to make a theater production go round.
Yeah, and that part was the easier part. That overlaps with the rehearsal or with the practice, components, all that kind of stuff that you're used to. The things that so often you hear theater directors have a tendency to preach teamwork, all working together and stuff, but their actions don't necessarily mimic that.
Because maybe they don't have a unique perspective.
Like
they understand the theory of teamwork, but maybe when it gets down to it, I can imagine trying to get a bunch of creatives to do anything together in a joint effort. I bet that's like kind of herding cats, I'm assuming.
It can be.
Depending on your dynamic of your team.
It really depends on the group. And for me, it was always the feeling of, I always knew that in football, if I missed a tackle or something, somebody was there and would have to pick it up. Mm-hmm. Acting doesn't really work that way. Yes, somebody can help you. If you forget a line, if something gets dropped like that, somebody can try to help get you back, lead you in, but they're not saying the line. Yeah. Which is the direct correlation to a tackle.
That's like a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
You're like the quarterback all the time.
Yes, and so I think people get caught up in that at a young age, and it's not corrected most of the time. But really, it comes down to the more ensemble based, and I hope, when you see Anastasia, what you're going to see is we've got an incredible ensemble. And it's one of those things, they are the water that lifts the buoy that is a lead. Yeah. And so often people forget that. If you don't lift the water, the buoy stays down too.
The analogies, Adam. I'm like, you're really laying it down today. I love it. I love it so much. That's great.
But so it's really rewarding when you see an ensemble like this. They do this incredible work, and then there's tying back to my own personal background as a Latvian and my family leaving the country during the war, there's this beautiful moment in Anastasia with a song called Stay, I Pray You, and it's pretty much all the ensemble. A few of our leads come in at the very end, but it's all of these actors that you've seen to this point playing multiple roles, doing all this kind of stuff. And it's at a train station. It's as they're leaving Russia to flee. And it was kind of one of those things. It was one of the big moments within the play for me. And even there, initially in talking with the actors, you could see this look on their face where it's like, oh, to Adam, the biggest moment in the play is not anything that is focused on the lead.
It's not like the glittery, it could be any play, but it's sometimes the most meaningful moments are the ones where the actor is not saying anything and is like taking a pause, and or maybe a smaller, to the untrained theater eye, I'm not saying like I'm an expert, but if you've never been to theater before, sometimes not saying something or the absence of something, like there's some sets in theater where there's just not a lot of decoration, and that's on purpose.
Yes, and that is very much of my style. And so even from there, what you'll see in some of what we're discussing is the psychology versus sociology element of it, right? The psychology is the leads who are creating the character. They're telling the direct story to the audience. But the ensemble is the sociology. They're the ones who are creating the world for everybody. Nobody wants Anastasia to come into the room and go like, and welcome to the palace. We have chairs.
Yes.
That's our ensemble comes in and establishes the world. This is a palace. How many people are working for the royal family? What is the opulence of the palace? How well are they dressed?
And talking about like Dimitri, I know that the thing about podcasts, though, this is going to probably air in April when the show's over, but just kind of bringing into that thought process, like Dimitri in the movie, first off, was my first crush. But also, he's not an actual character in the Romanov family, but he actually serves as a key component to telling the story about Anastasia. And Anastasia in general is, the movie at least, is a complete fabrication based off of a rumor, because the Romanov family, oh my gosh, like English and German history is so interesting to me, but the Romanov family had such an interesting life, but then they suspected that Anastasia was not actually killed by firing squad with the rest of her family, because this older woman, I think it was in the 80s or something, who came out and said, I'm Anastasia. And then they were able to prove that she was not. So the whole movie but it really captured people, because what a lot of people don't realize is that the king, or I guess Tsar, and Tsarina Alexandria, Alexandria was the favorite granddaughter of Queen Victoria.
Right.
And technically they were cousins from the Saxe-Coburg.
Yes.
Oh yeah. Like that's how Lucy Worsley is a historian that I'm obsessed with, and she wrote this incredible book about the Romanovs. But long story short, from a 30,000 foot view, they were cousins from Queen Victoria, going all the way back into what is now Germany, but it used to be called Saxe-Coburg. So the English royal family is actually more German than they are English. And so when they died, Queen Victoria's family was just devastated, because not only did they lose a boy cousin, they lost their favorite girl cousin, but then all of their children died. And nobody knew about Alexei, is that his name?
Yes.
His hemophilia, which is also common, because when you marry your cousin, there are genetic mutations, but there's also a reason.
The blue bloods.
Yes, exactly. And we love that. Okay, we're like level 5 history. I love this. But it was really interesting story. So basically, long story short, the Romanov family had so many rumors about them, because people were just so in love with them, and they could not think of how could this story really have happened.
Right.
So all productions of Anastasia, my understanding, are kind of like playing into that. But also, you talk about the ensemble cast. Like, people don't realize, like, it's a cute story about a girl, and like hopeful story of like, she actually escaped, and that's great. But people don't realize what the Russians were going through, and the Bolshevik Revolution, and why the entire royal family in Russia had disintegrated.
Yes.
So you have to really think about how your ensemble can talk about that story without blatantly saying, hey, life for people in Russia were not all that great. Was not all that great.
Well, and it's still to this day, from a socioeconomic thing, I think it's one of the bigger problems that Russia still runs into. Is I know that growing up in our family, it was always the joke that it's like, okay, are you European or are you Asian?
Yes.
And watching
Yes.
people go, well, it's clearly European. And I go, well, take a look at Russia.
Not really.
It's the largest country in the world. How's Asia the largest continent if it doesn't carry Russia? And just watching, oh, wait a minute.
I know. A lot of people don't realize that. And it's interesting because it's so ingrained within our culture. Okay, so my family escaped Lithuania because Russia and Germany were trying to get control over Lithuania.
Yeah. The farmlands.
Yes. So, you know, my grandparents ended up escaping to Germany, and they lived in West Germany for a while. Maybe I'm getting that reversed. But then they were able to immigrate to the United States because my grandfather was captured by the U.S. Army.
Yeah.
He went from he was captured by the Russian Army, then was captured by the German Army, and then was captured by the U.S. Army because he was 6'5", could speak 5 languages.
Yeah.
And he became a midwife in Alaska.
Yeah.
I'm still not buying that story. Like, his whole, story in the Army was he was a midwife in Alaska.
Yeah.
Right, that makes sense with Russia being very close.
Right.
Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, I think he was doing some coding on the side. But, because he could speak Russian, German, French, English, and I think Swiss German.
Yeah.
But anyway, to be able to describe what that culture is like, because my family in itself is probably similar to yours, like, it's hard to understand where, you know, what you fall into. Are you European? Are you Russian? Well, technically, if you're Russian, you're Asian.
Right.
So people don't realize that because it's a completely different culture.
Right.
So how did that impact you and, like, how you have approached, see how I turned that? Yeah. Hard right turn. But how has your background of having immigrated grandparents, people who had immigrated to the United States, how has that impacted you?
Oh, tremendously. Again, it has allowed me in my career. I don't know if I've ever felt like I had a hometown, but it wasn't home. There's not a part of me that misses where I grew up and wants to go back to live there. I love it when I go and visit. There's nothing like seeing the rolling farmland and grain and stuff. But
North Dakota is probably one of the most beautiful places I've ever been.
At the right time of year.
Because it's, not when it's negative 40.
Yeah.
When I had to buy negative 40 boots and FRs that were specific to that cold, it was a whole other game for me. So I always kind of wonder, you know, coming out, you got your master's degree in your MFA, and then you came down here. You went to Berkeley for a little bit, and you did some of your teaching, and then you came here. So, you know, having all of these wonderful experiences in your career and having the background that you have as a student athlete and having, you know, family that immigrated from Latvia, you know, you come to Midland Community Theatre, and you probably have a very global perspective on how to interact with our community who might have limited or who might not have limited experiences with theater, but might have gone outside of the country to experience other cultures. So can you kind of first explain to me what Midland Community Theatre is? Yeah. And then kind of tell me a little bit about how are you creating an opportunity for families to engage in different cultures through theater? Yeah. Loaded question. I'll remind you of the second question in a few minutes.
Thank you. So one of the things that people in Midland don't know, let alone within the West Texas region and Texas in general, Midland Community Theatre is one of the 5 largest community theaters in the nation by any metric.
What?
Yeah.
So when you say that, what do you mean? Is it population of your theater staff?
If you're talking about the size of the theater staff, the income revenue streams, your expenses, of course. But then when you talk about the quality of shows, the size of shows, those metrics, we're very well renowned. Wow. I know some of the shows that we'll be doing for our 26th season, and their show, you know, one of them is a show that we've been given the opportunity to do as it's coming available. It is not, the rights have not become publicly available yet.
Okay, I want to know all the politics behind scoring shows too later.
It really comes down to you put on shows at a level, you show to your licensing partner, your rights holder, that you're putting in the right amount of value into the show. You know, the last thing you ever want to see if you're the rights holder is, hey, you give this theater an opportunity to do it, and then they spend $1,000 total. You know, the quality doesn't come out, there are no pictures to be shown, and you're cutting the legs out from under it. It really gives us this opportunity. The thing that excited me coming in from the professional world was to be able to blend that high-scale theater, the things that I'd been doing and traveling around doing, and bringing it and seeing it in a community that so reflected my own growing up.
Okay, so you liked the idea. So, you know, a lot of our listeners may not know, but like you had traveled to California at Cal Berkeley, you worked there. You had worked over, you had family in Dallas, you probably went to multiple productions there. You were obviously in North Dakota and traveling all over the United States for, you know, basically after you graduated with your MFA. And so you were able to kind of understand, what are other people doing? What are these big productions? What are small productions doing? What do I like? What do I not like? And then you were able to come here and say, okay, great, listen, we actually, because I know we have a very huge, like, supportive group of people here in West Texas that truly care about preserving arts. For example, Mr. Garza with the West Texas Symphony. I mean, he's just his team's incredible. But also, like, the Wagner family, you know, Lisa Wagner and her husband, Asai, you know, raising that money for the Wagner Noel family. I mean, family, you know, performing arts center. It's incredible. So I can imagine with the Cole Theater that you kind of have a Cadillac of a theater, and I know it's going through renovations. And then you're not, I mean, that's impressive in itself, but then you also have a really great ensemble, and then you have staff, and like, let's not forget the lighting guys and, you know, the sound guys too. So you have this great team. What is really impactful about that really is allowing you to bring in this global perspective when you get the licensing for something like a big show? Like, what about each one of your team members? Because I'm big on promoting different teams, especially the guys that you don't see. What about their expertise makes y'all unique?
So one of the things that's interesting is Midland is, you know, it's like, what, 50% of our population are from Midland, and 50% are coming in. Our staff is really made up of the same sort of idea. And that's exciting in its own way, because it is so representative of what the community theater is. Same thing when we're dealing with our volunteers. Half of them grew up here and had Midland Community Theatre as their whole life, and they're like, well, this is what community theater is. And then you have half of the people who did not grow up here and grew up with a traditional community theater that is smaller in scale, is struggling to survive, all this kind of stuff. And they're like, no, you don't understand. That's normal. We are very lucky here. And it creates this great sense of ownership of the theater from all of our volunteers. And that's good and bad. You know, of course.
You're like, guys, it's all good. We're not here. We're not saving lives here, but like, we can care about our production. But, you know, I can imagine that can be difficult with so many creatives that really care. Sometimes you have to have that global perspective of saying, guys, listen, let's take a couple steps back and like, let's think of the bigger picture here.
And I think it's one of those, it's another one of the, I'll go back to an analogy, and a sports analogy at that, but there is no scoreboard. Like, it is not until
the arts in general are subjective.
Well, and it's not, and that's the scoreboard ultimately. Is it's when you're standing out at the end of the production, you're clapping for your castmates and you're doing your bows, that you see the scoreboard. Now the lights come up on the audience and you see how they've reacted to it. And that's the part that touched me a long time ago, and it still does every day.
So like the bug?
Well, it's watching the 8-year-old.
Oh, that's so cool.
Who's standing there and seeing theater for the first time or the second time, and they're just enraptured. And it's all the more important when that same person that has completely caught their awe is their teacher at school. Is, just sold them their last pair of pants at Target. That is the thing that I love, the professional work I did, but I was an outsider in most of those communities. I lived in Minnesota and would travel to California as a director, as an actor, all that kind of stuff. Or you're living in such a large community that you don't know these people. Even if they are professionals who live in the world with you, it's completely separated.
It's one thing to perform to a stranger than it is to somebody that you see every day
Yeah.
when you go get coffee.
Yeah, and that answers really the second part of your question when you're talking about culture and how do you bring the cultures together. I don't think there's a better representation of that. It's one thing, again, if you have professional actors and you're seeing a diverse cast, many different races, socioeconomic status, all that kind of stuff plays into it. But all of a sudden, when these are people that you know, it connects.
So, for example, I 100% agree with that because, like, Elaine Paulson,
Yes.
love her. Probably one of the most brilliant people I know. She's a mom of multiple kids, and she's professional, and somehow she's able to perform in Midland Community Theatre and Midland Festival Ballet.
Yep.
And I saw her at the Nutcracker, like for Midland Festival Ballet, who's we're having next.
Yep.
And I got like kind of emotional because it's so cool. I'm a big believer on adults doing what they did, like what they're really passionate about.
Yeah.
And if you're not sure what that is, I always tell people, go back to what you liked when you were 8 years old. And to me, to see Elaine go up there, and she's always so good. Like, she's a professional.
Yeah.
And she can really do such a beautiful job. It got me emotional because, like, it's so fun and just rewarding to see your community friends be able to do something that's, like, not their entire world, but you can tell that, like, that is a huge part of who Elaine is. Like, that's just the coolest experience. And then the fact that we're in our 30s, late 30s, you know, to see people still doing that, I just think is amazing.
Yes.
Like, you know, it's, I don't know, growing up in the 90s, we see all these videos and stuff about, like, you know, you should be in STEM and, you know, where did humanities fall into all of that? And I think people are coming really hard back on humanities and the importance of theater and just the performing arts, you know, structure in general.
Well, and it's, you know, it's been very interesting. When I was up in Indiana, I co-chaired the IDEA, Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, Access, chair arm of the Arts Council, the Indiana Arts Council. And there's a lot of studies that go into specifically looking at how theater, memorizing lines, all that can have an effect on neurodivergent audiences and practitioners. So it really, it's something that has always been a passion of mine, is the educational aspect that comes to it too. And how does it engage the brain and encourage not only learning, which is one thing, but actual growth and further development of the brain.
On that note, how do you think watching theater can help children just really hit those parts of their brain as young, like a young child or a young adult? Like, why is theater so important to a child's development?
It really comes down to it allows, any piece of theater requires there to be conflict. And one of the things that I personally don't think we do the best job in the United States is teaching ourselves, children, let alone as we become adults, how to address conflict in healthy ways. So personally, the first thing I always go to is you're watching, the nature of theater is watching a lead, your protagonist, the person that your children are going to identify with, come into conflict with their world. And then the remainder of the show, this is usually within the first 20 minutes of a 2-hour show. And then you have the remaining hour and 40 minutes that is all about how does this person react with the conflict to come to a solution that allows them to engage with their world again. You can't teach a child a more important message than that.
And then also just getting into like teaching people about the wide range of emotions that a human can have.
Yes.
You know, I feel like as we've gotten older and just seeing how the United States has changed over talking to people about their emotions and like understanding emotional regulation, I feel like theater is a great way to kind of introduce children to what emotional regulation looks like. Because if you have, okay, you said the first 20 minutes, you're building that tension up, you're seeing what the issue is, because you have to get that hook so that the audience can understand what is the rest of the play going to look like, right? So once you understand that tension and what that character is going through, you then see how they deal with it. And something that I've always kind of gone back to in my life is I work out and I do something strenuously physically tiring to make myself physically tired at the end of the day because it makes everything else in my life more doable. So like if I'm physically, you know, I got to work out and I feel like I've gotten that out, it makes me feel like everything else is just inconsequential and I can do it. Yeah. I feel like theater can also provide that to people that maybe don't want to lift weights or something. Yeah. You know, you can see a character go through something that would be maybe insurmountable for them or unsurvivable to that individual person who's watching that theater production. But then to watch that character grow and then see how they're able to accomplish things and overcome challenges, I feel like is something that can really help people understand that, yes, so for example, your example with depression and anxiety, right? When you have depression and anxiety, you can't really control that, and that's some people argue, but you can't. But to see a character go through something and then come out the other side, like that is what makes an interesting story. And I feel like that provides so much hope and more examples for children to know, like, yes, we can be sad, mad, angry, happy, but we can go through hard times and we can still come out the other end.
Yeah, and the thing that's really beautiful for me about live theater versus film or TV is it's the blend of both the ethos and pathos.
Yes.
When you're talking about this child, watching somebody process a feeling that they're going through as well, they get to see them come to a solution and be like, oh, it's okay. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be okay. The internal process has been had. They understand that for themselves. The bigger thing that comes from that is not that you don't see in movie theaters anymore, and you certainly don't. The downside of the world of streaming is it's like, well, why would I go to a movie theater? I can watch it from home. It's more of the isolation.
But then they go see Wicked in theater.
Yes.
And I'm going to be honest with you, I do not like musicals.
Right.
Like, why sing when you can talk, all right? That's been my whole thing. But, all right, listen. I've given it a shot, though. Yeah. I've seen Wicked, like, the legit one with, like, Kristen Chenoweth, which, like, all the Wicked people are going to get in arguments. That's not the real Glinda. That's not my Glinda. Ariana Grande's my Glinda. Apparently, that's a whole thing. Yeah. Like, people have, like, you know, they had an alphabet that they were like, that's the one. Right? India Menzel is a huge one for people who, if you don't know, she was also Elsa, right?
Yes, she's Elsa.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, I saw, and this is going to sound kind of rude, I saw Wicked in the Meyerson. No, not in the Meyerson, the Austin UT's theater.
Yeah.
It was right off New York Broadway.
Yeah.
And I hated it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know what it was about. And I didn't read the book.
Yep.
And it was like, what is going on? Because I thought we were literally going to go see like a different rendition of Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
That is not the case.
No.
Wicked is the prequel. I've gone down the TikTok like rabbit hole about that. I had no idea what it was about. Then I go see the movie and I was like, oh my gosh, I really appreciated the theater version way more.
Yeah.
And the Wicked movie was incredible.
Yeah.
Like, apparently they made everything out of scratch. Like, everything, like, a lot of the set was actual, not CGI.
Yes.
And
which is so abnormal now.
Yes. And apparently they're going to use the train at Universal Studios or something. And I don't know. I've read a lot. And then the whole drama with Ethan Slater and Ariana Grande brought me in, and I was like, that's odd. And then the crying of holding space in the interviews, it was just a lot. So then I go back and I remember thinking in high school, what did I really not like about that theater production? And then I realized I didn't know how to appreciate musicals.
Yeah.
So on that note, you know, bringing in, we've already talked about how people can be inspired and creatively inspired and like emotionally connected to theater. Why is it important? Sometimes this was not one of the questions that I sent to you, so sorry. I feel like we can shoot it straight, though. Why is it important to go to theater productions that you think you may not like? Like, why should I, you know, I'm thinking of my husband. He loves theater, but he hates musicals like I do. Why should we give a shot to going to go see, like, any production that we may not be initially interested in? What could a person learn?
Yeah, so I'll go micro, macro.
Love it.
I think on the more micro scale, one of the things is we often don't know, you know, it's very hard to get a teaser trailer out for a play.
It's hard to market it.
Yeah, going into it, knowing what it's going to do, what kind of emotions it's going to stir. It's just hard to put that out there. And then beyond that, theater is built in such a way to make you think in the moment. There is nothing scarier to us as like a species than being caught off guard in a group of people.
Kind of like what I'm doing right now.
Right. I spent too much time doing this. But there's a degree to which audiences don't want to go into a theater and be caught off guard by their feelings in a room full of 400 people they don't know.
That's a really good point.
But it comes back to, I think that's also it goes the other way though too, because I just think you build up this thing. If we go back to the kid who's watching a show, reacting to their emotions for the first time, and they've come through the process of feeling their own solo feelings, there's something so valuable to having the person right next to them go at the exact same time. And that collective
experience.
Feeling. Yeah.
Jinx.
And that is the thing, that is lost on audiences, that theater can engage them in, that they're not even aware is coming.
That's so vulnerable. That's like so impactful, because you're having a community experience, you're engaging with your community with really it's like a passive engagement, which is kind of nice.
Yes.
I mean, you wouldn't believe it, but I'm actually like kind of an introvert.
Yeah.
And that's like forced to like be an extrovert. And I get solace from like literally doing nothing outside of my job, because all I do is talk and, meet people all day.
Yes.
But, outside of work, the last thing I want to go do is like forced socialization. I hate. Like when I used to work in corporate America, which is a very short period of my life, I could not stand icebreakers.
Yes.
And like going out for drinks after, like I used to work in the oil field, going after NAPE and like go getting drinks with my coworkers. Like,
No,
I'd rather
you.
not. Like, can we not do that? So it's very interesting for people like me, like to be able to go into theater and be able to have a collective experience. It still can make you feel like you're a part of the community without having to like
engage. Passive engagement.
Gosh, this is great. I love it. You've already like hit so many of my questions. I love this so much.
No, on the macro side, back to that other question though, I think one of the things that can be so valuable about going to see theater that you don't anticipate that you're going to like is theater is not just one thing. And we get caught up in seeing theater as one thing. I always go to the analogy of, everybody thinks that musical theater is Oklahoma. And so often I'm like, people think of the film Oklahoma. I've directed Oklahoma 4 times now professionally. It's a show that I say I'd go back to every time.
Really?
It is not my favorite show to watch. It is my favorite show to direct, because there are so many stories to be told there. And it's, when you think of it, everybody's used to the story that is Curly, the strapping, the shining white knight, old Arthurian theory. And then you have Judd, who's the black knight trying to steal away Lori, the princess. I contend that is not the story. That's the one we're told. Lori and Aunt Eller own the farm. They hire both of these men. You can tell that story in just as interesting, if not, in my opinion, a more interesting way by making Lori is our perspective. She is the one we're watching, and she is looking at, okay, we've got the roughneck farmer who isn't who she's attracted to, not the life that she wants, not the person that she wants, but he's more directly aligned with the life that she has. Curly, as a rancher, is going to leave. If she chooses Curly, it's leave the farm with me, give up your life. That is much more dynamic storytelling to me than it is just like, I'm the good guy, I've come to save you. And it's like, yeah, right. Yeah. All of a sudden, you tell this story of a woman who is ahead of her time, owning the farm, trying to make these choices. The people coming around her in her interest, is she going to leave? Is she going to stay? And ultimately...
Because it matters, because it changes the entire trajectory of other people's lives.
Right. And ultimately, she chooses Curly, and Curly chooses to stay on the farm. He alters his life for her, and they come together to sing Oklahoma and establish what is the development of this new state through that storytelling. That's engaging.
Yes.
That's the thing that's interesting to me, and that is not what people think of when they think of Oklahoma.
Really?
What
would you say the average person would think about Oklahoma?
For the most part, it is the white knight.
Level.
It's white knight, black knight. one of them is going to choose and win Lori.
Which makes sense because, like, in school, you're learning, about different types of characters and their typical, trajectory of what they're going to play out in any literary work.
Yeah.
But if you're an English major, my husband is very much an engineer and I'm an English major. And like, so I'll be like, yeah, did you see that analogy? And like how, the real true hero, sometimes they'll wear dark colors and a white shirt.
Yep.
And they can be perceived as something. And then at their heart, they're pure and like kind. And you'll start to notice that too about actors. Like the next time that you guys go to a theater, try to look at the costume design and notice what colors your characters are wearing. Because sometimes what theater and also TV and movie, what they'll do is like if somebody's actually like not a good person or not a good character, they'll be all in black.
Yep.
To symbolize, lightness and darkness and like purity and like all that stuff. So it's so interesting. There's so much that you can learn from theater and just engaging in art in general that I think from the outside perspective, if you're not humanities inclined, and when I mean humanities is art and basically anything that is subjective in the academic world. So reading books, writing literature, listening to theater, looking at a painting, photography. It produces a different emotional reaction in so many different people. And you've done an excellent job kind of like explaining to us why it's so important for children to go to theater, because they can not only have hope that their story as a child will eventually turn out okay, but then also like normalizing emotions.
Yes.
In the South, we kind of like punish kids sometimes. I feel like it's getting better, but like growing up in the 80s and like 90s, a lot of Texan kids were used to saying like, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, like not talking back. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but just seeing other people experience emotions makes it feel less like of an issue.
Yeah.
As somebody who's from a traditional, very like, I would say traditional family, it can be really difficult to understand your own emotions if you're told to mind your manners.
Yes.
And it's almost like you have to gaslight yourself and say, that's not important.
Yeah, I don't feel that.
Yeah, and it's okay to still be respectful and mind your manners, but it's also important to understand your emotional range as well. One of the questions that I have that I think just as a parent of a 6 and a 4-year-old, what kind of tips would you give parents about like going to a theater? Because I cannot tell you how many times I've heard people say, I would love to go see The Christmas Carol, at the Midland Community Theater, but they're worried, again, that my child will not know how to behave or mind their manners. Yeah. But I can understand from your perspective, I'm already going to kind of assume that you would say, don't worry about that. Yeah. Don't worry about them minding their manners. Just come.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
So we are at a point within American theater that what do the manners mean anymore anyways? And that's not a judgment either way, but it is, we are coming to the very end of what was almost the first great wave of American theater that came through the 40s and everything, and everybody dressed up. It was...
Yeah, it's a thing.
It was not like a suit and tie would be underdressed. A tuxedo is the proper dress. Now, if
I'm
you
still of the persuasion, though, if you're going to go to a symphony, that you have to, like, dress up, but that's just...
Yeah. I enjoy dressing up for the theater and for arts, but simultaneously, I look at it that if it has a, negative effect on a person's experience...
It's going to limit them.
Does somebody else wearing jeans really bother me?
No. I get that.
I like, business casual is my thing. I'm very comfortable in that.
Yeah.
So that works for me. But when it comes to, so the easiest answer to what do you think if the kids, I don't know. If any of you know exactly how to get your kids to behave, let me know. I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. My 5-year-old's great. My 2-year-old, I don't think I'm ever going to get him to sit in the theater.
They're not online yet.
No.
They're like intrusive thoughts always.
And he's my bruiser. He'll walk through a wall before he'll sit down. Like,
I think that's a second-born child thing, for sure. Like my daughter, I love her very much, but I've had to go to the ER more than with her. If my firstborn were to ever get hurt and have to go to the ER, he would be devastated.
Right.
Because he's like, I broke the rules. Where my daughter would be like,
you see the scar?
Yeah, you see that? War wound. But yeah, I totally get that. Because, I mean, I'm going to be honest with you. I work with kids all day long. The number one thing we tell our families is do not apologize for your child having feelings, because learning to swim is one of the hardest things that you can learn to do, okay? Yeah. So, but it's almost like a reflex. People are like, I'm so sorry that my child had an emotion. Yeah. And I think that can be limiting. So, I mean, if you're that worried, maybe go to the matinee of the theater.
And my suggestion would always be, allow yourself to sit on the outsides. Remind yourself in those moments, are you going to the theater for you, or are you going for your child in this moment? If you're going for you, get a babysitter, leave the child at home. If you're going to have your child experience it, give yourself permission to leave the room. If the child can't sit there anymore, if you're sitting on the outsides, take them, go out to the lobby, let them, move around, get them a water. Once they're settled, come right back in and let them go through it. They aren't trained like us anyways. Cartoons, if we're lucky, are 20 minutes. Yeah. Now they're broken down into 3 sections within the 20 minutes. So sitting for 6 minutes. Or
Coco Melon every 3 seconds. Yes. It's changing.
And so it really becomes one of those things that bring the kids. Don't be afraid of that. Just also don't be afraid to step out, miss something, and bring them back in.
And the new Cole Theater's renovations are going to have a larger area for people to come out and walk around.
Yeah, we'll have a much larger we'll have a much larger lobby space. Below that, though, is an education space. So we have a very robust education program, and we're very excited with the expansion of that. We're going to be able to double the number of classes that we're offering. That's awesome. So that would be the other part of it, is some of the time kids still struggle in live theater to understand that the people on stage are live and can hear them and see them. They're so used to film.
I can imagine as a parent, like your kid saying, "Why is that lady's hair that color?" And you're like,
"Yeah," and that's one of those things that there have been times that my oldest, Xander, at 5 years old, will be sitting in the theater. He spent his whole life around theater,
and he knows those people too.
And we'll be sitting there, and he all of a sudden will look up and he goes, "Oh, that's Carly." And I'm like, "Yeah, buddy." She's been there the whole time.
He's like, oh, now it's making sense, Dad.
Yeah.
That's funny. Gosh.
But, participating in classes and all that too, so that they understand what is happening in front of them makes it so much easier as well.
And a lot of people may not realize that you guys offer spring break camps and summer camps, and that's great.
In addition to year-round classes. So at any time, there are always classes that are available all the way from pre-K dance for 3 to 5-year-olds. Then we start our kindergarten through 3rd grade, and then 3rd through 6 are all there year-round. And we go to 6 because at 12, students become eligible for our Pickwicks program.
That's really cool. I know Pickwicks is a huge thing. Yes. But that's great. My last question for you today, this has been so engaging. I hope people have really gotten a better taste for theater and understanding the intrinsic value of it. Yeah. But my last question for you is, what gives you hope for the future of Midland?
Yeah, so when being fairly new to Midland, it's one of those that, as I was doing my research coming in, I think there's a lot of just growth opportunity for Midland. We are in a unique situation where we have both land and infrastructure, which when you talk about from a development standpoint, you can't ask for more than that.
Yeah.
And everybody in Texas is like, well, you're so far from everything. Again, I grew up in the Dakotas where Minneapolis was an 8-hour drive for us, and then Denver is the next metro in that area, and you're talking 14 hours. So 5 hours, I'm like,
wild.
That's easy.
That's wild when you think of it that. I honestly don't know if I've ever thought of it that way.
Yeah, because it's down here, everybody's like, oh, well, it's not like the coasts, and I'm like, you're right. But you're not like the North.
Exactly. Yeah, you guys don't realize. Well, that's cool. I think I agree with you. The interesting thing about Midland is that our land and our oil informs our infrastructure. And I feel like that is just such an incredible opportunity. I mean, with the Cole Theater expanding, and we have so many new things that are happening within our community that I really truly think that it's just going to benefit. We're just seeing a lot of construction right now, but give it a year or two.
Well, and I'll even shout out, I mean, for us as a family moving in, it drives me crazy when I hear people say there's nothing to do in Midland. And I'm like, I can understand that if you're somebody who's just graduated college and you came from a college town. I understand. Not going to try to change your mind on that. As somebody who's raising a family, we instantly signed up for the Petroleum Museum, Museum of the Southwest. It is a great place to raise kids. And then you see that future potential of infrastructure and growth, it really does feel like, the potential in Midland here is unbound. And
If you come, I think that's a really good point. I think if you come into it being like, if you have the perspective of Houston,
yeah,
and you try to put your perspective of what Houston is, or
right.
Dallas, or Denver, or Louisiana, even for people that come here from Louisiana, if you take that perspective and say, I want a Houston in Midland, you're going to be disappointed. Mm-hmm. But if you see Midland for what it is, as its own unique microcosm of just honestly random people that are, a lot of us are transplants trying to make our community better, I feel like you can really get a better opportunity to appreciate our little city here in West Texas. Well, thank you. I appreciate it so much, Adam, that you came here and you honestly answered all of my questions without us even trying today.
Yeah.
I love it. Those are the best kind of interviews. Well, thank you so much. And be sure to follow us and follow Midland Community Theatre on Instagram. They're going to be posting some of our videos. And be sure to check out their latest productions for 2025 going to 2026, because it sounds like it's going to be really great. All right. Thanks so much. Bye.